All right, I'd like to say hello to all of you folks out there in Internet land. I'd like to welcome you to our formerly Comparative Religions, now to our Comparative Witchcraft study book. And what I study group, rather. Now, some of you who may have been familiar with last week's might find it interesting that I've changed the name to Comparative Witchcraft. And it comes down to the fact that I thought comparative religions would be far too broad, far too well, not pagan, for lack of a better phrase. And I would like something that is more strictly about witchcraft, that doesn't have a fly flying around my head, but more about witchcraft. But we are still using the same book, Real Energy, by Isaac and Phaedra Bonowitz, and we'll look at it more from a pagan or Wiccan, strictly witchcraft point of view. And we agreed last week that we would go over the introduction to Real Energy. Now, the introduction to Real Energy is a bit interesting because it doesn't really talk too much about what we're going to be going over. It talks about who our authors are, who Isaac and Phaedra really are, and also the methods to coming to this wonderful opus that is Real Energy. So let's begin at the beginning with who the authors are. Isaac Bonowitz was a well-known druid, archdruid of an organization called Arne Drugat Fane, which means our own druidism, which he served archdruid until his illness. Along that, he is a very accomplished pagan author, and he actually had a real degree in that of magic, which he received from the University of California, Berkeley. Phaedra Bonowitz was his last wife, and she is known for being involved with an organization called CUPS. And CUPS is the Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans. You might have heard the term in there, Unitarian Universalist. Why are we talking about a semi-Christian organization? Well, that's just it. It's semi. The Unitarians actually gave early pagans a way into the ministry.
Slow down.
Being instructed to slow down. But anyway, the Unitarians actually helped to bring pagan clergy into existence, particularly at times when personal traditions did not have a clergy system. You were able to become a legal reverend minister, what have you, through the Unitarians. But anyway, she's known for being a founding member, particularly that of the National Board of Directors, which she served as vice president. Now, they are also well-known occultists, tradition heads, so they wrote the book on energy, and it includes physics and everything else in it, so we can say that this source, if not always correct, the authors do indeed give that warning in the introduction that sometimes there might be issues scientifically, like through physics, but it is still a fine source. So let's talk about the source itself. The very first section of the introduction reads, what do we mean by real energy? So exactly what do they mean? Well, real energy is really the concept of what we work with. What is real energy? Is it real, is the question that we're going to hope to answer by studying this book and going through this study group. So, therefore, let's delve right into it. What is real energy? How is it perceived? Well, in my background, it tends to come from sort of the creation story. Deity and spirit is the universe, the energy itself. Energy is made up of vibrations. How we work with energy is to change vibrations, try to manipulate them. And depending on our energy workings and how the vibrations go, will dictate our result. So if you're dealing with more low vibrations, you're dealing on more of a physical plane, where we are right now, the physical, ruled over primarily by the God. But then we also have higher vibrations as you go up through the 7 planes of existence, highest being the goddess or deity. You get higher and higher vibrations, so you're affecting things on a more cosmic level. Okay, now I'd like to ask if there are any opinions out there about this. Any opinions out there yet? Well, apparently not. But if you'd like to share an opinion, please do.
Phaedra is awesome.
Phaedra Bonowitz is awesome. She is a wonderful woman. I have much respect for her. Thank you for your support of her as well. But let's delve back into the text a little bit. We also have the idea of figure 1 in the introduction with something is labeled dueling paradigms. What are these paradigms? They are the ideas of how we will perceive the source of energy, which are dualism, pluralism, and polarism. Dualism, used a lot by Christian-like groups, separates the energies into two distinct mixed, if you will, non-colliding categories. They do not interlock. There's a wall between them, and they separate into such things as light and dark, good and evil. How we judge things, we usually put them in a process of dualism. The Christians will say, for instance, that sin or Satan is evil, while God and virtue is good, and there is no, flow in between them. They are two separate things divided by a wall, heaven and hell. That is dualism. Then we move on to the next section, which is pluralism. And the biggest symbol of pluralism is the yin and yang symbol. And if you can't see it, I have a ring of it. Hopefully, can you see that? A little bit? Kind of? Alright, whatever. But the yin-yang symbol, Chinese symbol uses it, Confucianism uses it, and it is the idea that light and dark cannot exist without one another, that to have one, you must have the opposite. So it is something that in other words, everything has to happen. Pluralism, it needs its opposite. It needs a complement. God and goddess complement each other, create spirit. Light and dark, without them you wouldn't have a day, you wouldn't have light and dark half of the year, you wouldn't have the lunar cycle, you see. So it is more of an idea that all things are either inherently neutral, or depending upon who you talk to, inherently positive or pure, in a sense. And I wonder if there's any comments out there in the chat rooms right now. Questions, comments, anything? Okay, you get that? A resounding no. Now, pluralism is a little bit more complicated. It can be really summed up by what both Phaedra and Isaac say, in that pluralists will react to new information by saying, that's interesting, I wonder what it means. It means generally that when we look in a plural view, a pluralistic view, we see things in a way that no category, virtually. It's just, what does it mean? What is its reason for being? That's pretty much a singular view almost, but it applies to everything, hence the pluralistic view. And in different, if you want to understand the other ways, the pluralist would look at the data and they would say, is there some way we can combine this idea with its opposite to get a better handle on it? In other words, we can't understand pluralistic energy unless it has its complement. How can we bring the complements together to make it work as one? That is polarism. Now, finally, this is how the dualists would insist that new information or ideas must fit into only one of two categories allowed to exist, i.e., or rather e.g., true or false, rational or irrational, good or evil. They have to conform to only one of these ideas. So in a nutshell, that's how different things are looked at. And of course, we already discussed their backgrounds.
Oh, with pluralism.
With pluralism.
Is that kind of the idea of trinity that you see more often in, for example, Druidry, or is it more than three?
It can, on the way Druids look at it, certainly pluralism would be a look at three. The Celtic knot symbol comes from that idea. You will see, particularly Isaac Bonowitz was an archdruid. So the idea of a trinity existing within and he is also he considered himself a pluralist. So therefore, I'm willing to say that it would be a three or more. And everything does not necessarily have to conform to everything. And if it does happen to conform with everything, well, why explain it further? It doesn't have, in pluralism, there doesn't need to be two set ideas, is what it comes down to in my understanding. what pluralism really is. And the best way to look at pluralism in a modern sense is quantum theory. It's very pluralist. You know, everything is everything almost. But, so that virtually sums up the introduction, other than saying this. Throughout this book, we'll be delving into energy workings, energy exercises. And they use the term exercise and activity on purpose. You have to do these exercises, and we should get these exercises in a form posted. If you do not have the book, but would still like to follow along, we can do that for you. And when you are looking at an exercise, actually do it. Because it's one thing to read an exercise and come to understand it, that it is to actually do the exercise and feel the energy move and work. And that's how we'll understand what energy is. So that pretty much covers our real energy segment. But since this is comparative, but before we move on, actually, is there any last ideas, questions out there about the introduction of real energy?
Let's see, anything? Nothing so far.
Very cool. We can then move on to some witchcraft symbology. So that again, we're moving over from real energy into a little bit about symbology, and with some of the basic symbols that a lot of Wiccan pagan witchcraft groups use. Probably the most famous of them is our pentagram, which is of course the 5-pointed star. And very basically, it has come to be synonymous with the idea of witchcraft and paganism, and it is also the great representation of the circle of life, kind of. But it also represents the 5 elements. We have spirit, earth, air, fire, and water, back to spirit, and the cycle starts again, which is where we get the symbol of the pentacle, which is, of course, the pentagram within a circle. Unfortunately, some groups like to use it like this, and we all know what that's symbology of, but I don't want to get into that right now. Primarily, in my belief system, pentagram should always be right side up. Spirit, earth, air, fire, water, the elements. Very basically. And that will bring us on to another not-so-known symbol, which is that of the heptagram, or what some groups refer to as the septagram, or the 7-pointed star. Now this star is a little interesting, considering its roots. A lot of people will equate the symbol with Aleister Crowley, who used this as the seal of Babylon, as what he referred to it as. I believe. Yes, he did the Seal of Babylon, or the Star of Babylon, and it was a symbol for his, I believe, ceremonial, or rather Golden Dawn group called Ordo Templi Orientis. So that was his symbol that he used. So it was used also in Kabbalic witchcraft. But also, it is known as the, I will call it the Star of the Fae, or the Elven Star, which a lot of fairy traditions will use this symbol for. And it is also what pagans will use as a symbol of magical power. In some groups, I don't want to say any because I'm not 100% sure on which groups use it or not, but in some groups it is a symbol that can only be worn by, say, the high priest, the head of the coven, as it were, to denote their ability as an elder or top-tier hierarchy within the organization. But more historically, it is an alchemical symbol, and it is the alchemical symbol that represents the 7 old planets corresponding with the 7 old elements. I'm not sure which point is which, but the planets and the elements that they rule over are as follows. We have the sun, which is gold, the moon, which is silver, the Mercury, which rules over quicksilver or mercury, and of course we have Venus, copper, Mars, iron, Jupiter, tin, and Saturn is lead. And those all have their own alchemical symbols with them, which I would like to post a list of them as well. Hopefully with a heptagram that shows which point is which planet and element. So speaking of alchemy, that will bring us on to the next section, which
The
actually...
top one, the very top
The
one,
very top one,
is the sun.
we have the sun here for the septagram.
Next one down, Mercury.
Mercury,
Next one after that is, oh dear God, what's the one with the circle and the little horns on top, the female symbol of horns?
that's Mercury.
Mercury.
Yeah.
Then the moon.
Moon.
Then the H with a symbol through it, with a slash through it.
The H with the symbol, that would be Jupiter, I believe?
No, Jupiter's the 4.
Oh.
What's
Oh, that would be Saturn. That'd be lead.
Saturn.
That's lead, yep.
Saturn, and then Jupiter,
Jupiter,
and then Mars.
Mars. Can we have that one more time? Because a little
Right.
scattered.
Sun,
Mm-hmm.
Venus.
Venus.
You need to be saying this because they're not going to hear me.
We have the sun up here,
Mm-hmm.
which is gold.
Venus.
Venus, which is copper.
I forget it already. Mercury.
Mercury, which is quicksilver or mercury.
Moon.
The moon, which is silver.
Saturn.
Saturn, which is lead.
Jupiter.
Jupiter is tin.
Mars.
And Mars is iron. So we will hope, because that wasn't quite too clear, nor was it concise, we will hopefully post some sort of a diagram shortly. But again, the Star of the Fae, or the Elven Star.
Isn't it also used by the Cherokee?
I believe it is used by the Cherokee. It might even be used by the...
7 clans.
Well, it's actually not the Cherokee. If you're talking about the 7 clans, 7 clans would be the nation, the Iroquois nation, with the 7 tribes of the Iroquois nation, I believe. But the Cherokees do use it, and it usually, I believe, denotes a higher up within their tribal hierarchy. Please, if anyone out there knows otherwise, do inform us, and we will again hopefully post a clear, concise little guide on the septagram, heptagram, which is more of the lesser known of the, well, grams, the stars. And if there isn't anything else, I'll move on to the final symbol I'd like to cover tonight, or final group of symbols I'd like to cover tonight. But is there anything else before I do that?
If anyone wanted to know, the 7 Fey elements are metal, earth, wood, water, fire, and electricity.
That would be the Fey elements for those.
Yes.
The Fey elements are also earlier on ancient Chinese elements.
Electricity wasn't a Chinese element.
That's from Goddess in the chat room.
From Goddess in the chat room. That is a variation, rather, on the ancient Chinese elements. But again, hopefully we'll have a more clear, concise guide to the heptagram next time. But now that'll bring us on to some of the alchemical symbols, which are a little different. These are a bit of an art version of them. You can see the up triangle, with the point at the top, is that of the element of fire. As you can see, our salamander on this particular version of it is also a creature of fire. This symbol represents fire. We have the right side up triangle with the horizontal line and a bit of a U on the end of it there is air. Our third elemental symbol, which is the upside down triangle with the horizontal line through it, is that of earth. And finally, the upside down triangle with no horizontal line through it is that of the element of water. And again, these are the 4 elemental alchemical symbols for the elements. Now, bit of a simple thing, right? I'm not really 100% sure of their other symbolic meanings. But together, if you put all the elemental symbols together, you will see, I don't know how easy it is to see this image, but you have our hexagram. You'll see our hexagram. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, hexagram actually drawn for me by Reverend Dunn. Quite excited that he drew it for me, because we couldn't find one. But the hexagram, some people might recognize as the Star of David. And it is indeed in Kabbalic witchcraft referred to as the Seal of Solomon. But more basically, the alchemists used the six-pointed star as a full conglomeration to represent all four of the elements. Because if you see, can we see it again? Just make sure it's clear.
Yeah.
Okay, you can see our silver triangle, which of course is, gotta cheat, is water. And of course then you will have the horizontal line cutting through it, making that earth. And the gold triangle without the horizontal line is that of fire. And with the horizontal line is air. So it is a conglomeration of all four of the elements. So it was very important to have, because overall, the points I don't believe have any particular meaning, but as it is, as the hexagram is a smashing together of all four of those elemental symbols, it also therefore creates in and of itself the fifth element, which is that of deity. So the six-pointed star represents deity, and then outside of that we have the four elements. Again, another alchemical symbol. In other such ideas, it is sometimes referred to as the talisman of Saturn. That I'm not 100% sure of the origin, but if anyone is interested, either please go out and do your own research, or I will come back with some of my own. But that is really our hopefully concise guide to the alchemical symbols and the popular symbols of paganism. I'd like to extend some of the discussion out there to all of you folks that are watching, and if there are any questions, comments, or perhaps any potential discussions out there, please do share it with us. And do we have anything as of now? But, so, that pretty much wraps up where I wanted to be today. And for next week, we would like to explore to begin with, the first chapter of Real Energy. And the first chapter of Real Energy deals with really the concept of what is energy. We'll be going through a little bit about quantum mechanics of energy, wavelengths and such. For those of you science geeks out there, you'll enjoy that. And if you're not a science geek, I apologize in advance. But we will also be discovering how very early practitioners used, such as the alchemists and early astrologers, used energy workings to go through. Also, I believe we'll be touching upon Qi and the Japanese version Ki next week. So again, for next week, first chapter of Real Energy, and we'll also have some fun discussion topics which will be posted after this that you can get started on as well. Just some open discussion things. So I'd like to thank you all for watching me and participating in our Comparative Witchcraft study group. And until next week, may you blessed be. If there isn't any questions or comments out there.
They find the word geek offensive.
You find the word geek offensive, I'm very sorry. I mean, it is an endearing term. I call myself a geek every once in a while. I mean, look at me. So, please don't be offended. I didn't mean it as a defense. Anything else out there?
Anything else, Lexi? No? All right.
Well, then see you next week, folks. And again, thank you very much for participating in Comparative Witchcraft.